Today we're going to be talking about performance reviews. A performance review is not a school report, okay? You're not handing out grades and you're not judging somebody's fundamental worth as a human being. A performance review is a guided check-in. It's a structured conversation designed to do a few things: celebrate what's working, clear up any confusion, reset expectations where needed, and help someone to do their best work so that your practice and your people grow together. Performance reviews aren't about control, they're about clarity. Okay, they're about growth and they're about building a self-managing practice. If your team was fully aligned and performing at their best, what would change in your practice this year? How would things look different in 2026? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Now, today I'm going to introduce you to a topic that on the surface can sound a little dry, but in reality, it might be one of the most freeing leadership skills that you ever develop in your practice. Today, we're going to be talking about performance reviews. Now, stay with me because this is not going to be an HR conversation. This is a leadership conversation. This is a culture conversation. And honestly, for most chiropractors, this is the missing piece that keeps them stuck working in the practice instead of on it. So let's talk about why performance reviews matter and why most chiropractors avoid them. Now, most chiropractors don't avoid performance reviews because they're lazy. They avoid them because they don't want to feel like the bad guy. They don't want confrontation. They don't want to do HR, or they're worried that they'll say something wrong and make things awkward. So what is it that ends up happening instead? Reviews get delayed, feedback becomes vague, standards slowly start to slide, and frustration quietly builds, usually in you, the owner of the practice, not just in the team as well. Now, when reviews don't happen or they happen poorly, three things almost always show up in a practice. Your team feels unseen, expectations become unclear, and accountability becomes something that's optional in your practice. And that's when you hear yourself saying things like, why do I need to keep on reminding them? Why doesn't anybody take ownership? Or why does this feel harder than it should? Now, here's the flip side. When performance reviews are done really well, your team is going to feel valued. Your practice becomes really, really focused, and the people around you become empowered. That's why all of this matters. All right, so let's talk about what a performance review actually is and what it's not as well. A performance review is not a school report, okay? You're not handing out grades and you're not judging somebody's fundamental worth as a human being. A performance review is a guided check-in. It's a structured conversation designed to do a few things: celebrate what's working, clear up any confusion, reset expectations where needed, and help someone to do their best work so that your practice and your people grow together, okay? If a review feels like a test, you're going to end up getting defensiveness from your staff members. And if it feels like coaching, you'll end up getting growth, okay? Let me say that again. If your reviews feel like a test, you'll get defensiveness. But if your reviews feel like coaching, then you're going to get growth across your practice. Now, there's three parts to a performance review. This framework is what I want to teach you in this episode, okay? Now, these three parts are: number one, there's the preparation. Number two is the conversation. And number three is the follow-up. And if you miss any one of these, the review loses its power, okay? So let's dive a bit deeper into each of those, and starting with the preparation. Preparation starts with one simple question that you're asking yourself: why am I doing this review? Now, sometimes it's a routine review. It's just a regular check-in. For example, this is one of your regular 3 to 6 monthly check-ins. Nothing is wrong, but you just want to acknowledge what's working, make sure that you're aligned with a staff person, and set clear focus for the next few months. Okay, now hopefully most of your reviews will be like this, okay? Now, sometimes it's a performance review, okay? This means something is not being met. For example, there's a reoccurring gap between something that you've agreed on and something that's actually happened. Maybe it could be around punctuality, follow through, or a specific part of the role. This review is about clarifying that standard and understanding what's getting in the way and to get performance back on track. Now, sometimes it's a growth review, okay? Now, these are fantastic to do because this means that somebody is ready for more. So, for example, someone's doing really well in the role and you think that there's more potential there. A review is about stretching them, giving them more responsibility and supporting them in the next level of their growth. And sometimes it's about a reset. There's confusion, there's tension, or there's change. Now, a reset review is about clarity and relationship. It's not about performance metrics, okay? So, for example here, something feels off right now. There's been confusion, mixed expectations, or a change in circumstances. This isn't necessarily about somebody doing a bad job, but it's about slowing things down. It's about clearing the air, and it's about resetting how the two of you are working together going forwards. Now, each one of these has a separate tone. Each one has a separate focus. When you're clear on the purpose, you walk into the conversation calm, not reactive. You're not winging it, okay? A good review is never a surprise. It's a process, not a performance. Now, part 2, after we've done the preparation, is about the conversation, okay? And every good review answers 3 simple questions. What's working? What needs improvement? And what's next? All right, let me say that again. Every good review answers 3 questions. What's working? What needs improvement? And what's next? You start with strengths. Always, okay? You stay curious, not confrontational, and you finish with clarity in around the next steps. Now, one of the powerful tools here, again, I'm going to go into some questions later on here, is a simple framework of red, yellow, green, okay? This is not a scorecard, but it becomes a shared language. Red is something that needs work. Yellow is something that's inconsistent or is still developing, and green is an area where they're performing well. Now, when your ratings don't match, there's no need for panic. Most mismatches don't come from bad intent. They just come from unclear expectations. This is about you staying calm. It's about you getting curious. It's about you clarifying the standard and turning this gap into a goal, okay? This is coaching. This is the whole reason we're doing the performance review in the first place, okay? Now, part 3 is the follow-up. Now, follow-up is where trust is either built or it's where it's broken. Many of you are missing follow-up. Reviews without follow-up end up feeling hollow, okay? They're all talk and no change. Follow-up simply says this matters and you matter. It means summarizing on what was agreed. It means booking the next check-in before you leave the room. It means that you're tracking 1 or 2 things, not 10. Okay, if there's room for improvement, and maybe if there are room for improvement in 10 things, we're going to pick the priority of the top 1, 2, or 3, okay? And then it's acknowledging improvement when it happens, okay? Leadership is about keeping the promises that others often forget that they made. Now, let's move on to the questions to ask. And this is, again, when many of you either succeed or failed. Now, before I give you these questions, there's one really important distinction that I want to make here because this is where a lot of chiropractors get it wrong. This is not a one-way review. The CEO and the team member both fill in these questions before the conversation, okay? This way, you're not surprising them in the room. You're not having to think on the fly. You've already got their answers back as well. And you're not guessing about how they see themselves, okay? Both of you come into this performance review prepared, and that's what makes the conversation calm and grounded and productive. Think of the review as a mirror that you're both looking into together, okay? This is not a verdict that you're handing down as well. Now, one of the most common questions that I get is, okay, Angus, what do I actually ask, okay? This is where most reviews either create clarity or they create confusion, okay? So here's a principle for you to anchor into. If it's not in the job description, it shouldn't be in the review, okay? So the review and the role must talk to each other. I like to use a small number of core questions, enough to create clarity, not so many that it turns into an interrogation, okay? So let me give you 2 practical examples here. We'll talk about a review with a CA and we'll talk about a review with with a DC, one of your associates, okay? So let's start with the CA first. When reviewing one of your CAs, I'm usually looking at 5 to 8 key areas, and I'm going to share 5 of them with you here. The first is attitude and team contribution, okay? I'm going to ask a question similar to this. How do you feel that you're contributing to the team culture right now? And what's one example where you felt proud of how you showed up at work? So we want examples of these. We're asking the question and then give me an example of it, okay? The second question is in around reliability and follow through. How confident do you feel you are in your consistency in around punctuation and follow through? Where do you feel you're strong and where do you feel that you could tighten things up? Okay, so remember, there's an area there for them to go into some more details, and there's an area there where they're just going to give themselves a red, a yellow, or a green score. The third question is in around communication and patient experience. How do you feel your communication is landing with patients? Again, so that's that question. Are they red? Are they yellow? Are they green? And again, what part of the patient experience do you feel most confident owning? We want them to give some details there. And us as the CEO of the practice, we can give them specifics about where they're doing really well and where things might be breaking down, okay? Question number 4, or area number 4, is in around role competency. What part of your role feels easiest right now? And what parts feel clunky and unclear? Again, these are the areas for them to elaborate on, not so much green, yellow, and red for these ones. And the final area here is in around growth and learning. What's one skill you'd like to improve or develop over the next 30 to 90 days? Then what I do is I always finish with, what do you feel is working really well right now? And what are 1 or 2 areas that we should focus on next? Okay. These 2 questions here. And again, you want alignment in what's working well. And again, you want alignment in what do you think the next 2 things that you should be focusing on. Again, don't worry if there's not alignment through there, okay? This is a coaching opportunity for you to see what resources are missing, for you to make sure that you're aligned again in terms of expectations, right? Let's look at some questions that we might ask an associate chiropractor as well. The focus here is going to move towards ownership, towards leadership and consistency, not micromanagement, okay? So area number 1 is in around clinical confidence and consistency. Again, questions we could ask could be something like this. How confident do you feel in your clinical decision-making right now? Again, how do they feel with their technique? What are they doing with their assessments in terms of how good are they at finding subluxation and correcting it? Where do you feel most in flow and where do you hesitate? We want to find this out particularly with our newer grads. The second area, of course, is communication and patient leadership, okay? How do you feel your communication is landing during new patient visit, reporter findings, and your daily interactions? Where do you feel patients trust you most, and where do you think trust could deepen? These are good questions for you to find out, okay? Once you know where the gap is, you can work with them to improve it, okay? Again, area number 3, retention and care continuity. What do you notice about patient follow through and retention in your care? Okay, what patterns are you seeing? Now, you're going to have hard data for this as well. You're going to see what their retention is so you can bring it back to them. Hopefully, maybe you've got some KPIs built around what you would expect their PVA to be. Again, question number 4 would be contribution to the practice. How do you feel you're contributing beyond just adjusting? Culture, mentoring, and leadership, okay? What more would you like to take ownership of? If we want a self-sustaining practice, then we need to make sure that our entire team are contributing, okay? So this needs to be part of their performance review. We need to get really clear about this, and this helps them take ownership. When I hear of chiropractors telling me that their associates aren't involved in their marketing, their community outreach, they're not involved in their team trainings, it's because you're missing this out in the performance reviews. And the 5th and final area here is all about growth and direction. What does growth look like for you over the next 3 to 6 months, okay? And how can I better support you as a leader and a clinician? And again, I finish with the same thing. What's working really well right now and what's 1 or 2 things that we should intentionally improve. Now, again, you might want to hit rewind and go back and take down these questions word for word. Again, but there's 5 areas across both the CA and the DC. Now, the final reminder about the questions, the goal here is not to try and catch people out, okay? The goal here is to create a shared language, clear expectations, and a coaching relationship, okay? This is not a parent-child dynamic. This is not a teacher-student dynamic, okay? Now, common performance review mistakes that I see, here's a few mistakes I see all of the time. And I've made all of these. This is how I've learned them, okay? Is treating reviews like a school report. We mentioned this right back at the very beginning. It's about being vague instead of specific. We want to be really clear about where their behavior is not the way that you want it to be, with examples if possible. And again, where their behavior is exactly how you want to be, with examples, okay? Another mistake is that we avoid the hard conversation, thinking that if we just stick our head in the sand, this will go away. It never does. When we avoid the hard conversation, it just gets worse, and we don't give the person an opportunity to improve, okay? Another mistake that we have here all the time is not booking a follow-up. As I mentioned beforehand, we never leave the review without putting in the diary when the follow-up is. Now, sometimes there might be micro follow-ups that need to happen on a weekly basis before a big performance review. The next one might be in 90 days' time, okay? Tracking numbers, but not actually discussing them. So maybe you're keeping an eye on their certain KPIs, their PVA, retention rates, rebooking rates, these sorts of things there, but you never actually discuss them in the reviews there. And again, I mentioned this beforehand, waiting too long to address issues. Okay, now these don't come from bad leadership. They just come from a lack of structure. That's all it is. You don't have the structure in around the performance reviews, in around their job descriptions, in around their KPIs as well. All right, let's wrap this up and talk about what to do next. Performance reviews aren't about control. They're about clarity. Okay, they're about growth, and they're about building a self-managing practice. If your team was fully aligned and performing at their best, what would change in your practice this year? How would things look different in 2026? So here's your next simple steps, okay? Pick one team member, okay? Block out 30 minutes and have the conversation, okay? You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be intentional. All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives, and I'll see you back here next week. See you, gang. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.